On episode 194 of Wheel Bearings, Nicole talks about her first drive in the new Jeep Wrangler 4xe plug-in hybrid. Roberto talks about his experience with a 2020 Kia Sorento rental car. And I talk about the 2021 Buick Encore GX and the Lexus GX460. Not much news to talk about today, but we do answer a bunch of listener emails. All coming up on this episode of Wheel Bearings. This is Wheel Bearings episode 194, and after my co-hosts have abandoned me for a week to take some vacation, we're back again. Who do we have with us?
I am Nicole Wakeland, and I'm a freelance journalist. And this week's, I'll do a shout out to Drive Mode Show, which is one of the outlets I write for.
All right.
My name is Roberto Baldwin. I am an automotive and a tech journalist, and let's say Forbes Wheels.
Oh, sounds good. All right. Nicole, you had something you wanted to share with us.
I do. So we have a shout out to some of our latest Patreon supporters. So to Lee Gibson, Mike Enos, Matt Cooney, and Thomas Kunkel, thank you for supporting the show. And if you want to support the show, you can. You can head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. And for $2.50, you get the blind spot monitor level. For $5, you get the forward collision avoidance. I feel like we need to come up with more levels, guys. I think there's a lot more autonomous vehicle technology.
I think we can do that.
Okay.
But so for Patreon supporters, one of the things you get besides an ad-free version of the show is you get early access to some of the special episodes. Like, for example, last week or earlier this week on the main feed, I put out an interview that I did with Danny Shapiro, the senior director of automotive at NVIDIA. But that was available to Patreon supporters about a week and a half earlier. So if you want to get first access to all that good stuff, help us out on Patreon. And we're going to have some more cool stuff coming. Dan is actually auditioning some aspiring writers to post some articles on the website. And we're going to be actually paying them a little bit, give them a chance for some exposure and a little bit of cash from the Patreon fund. And we're working on other stuff, too. And hopefully as we get further into the year and hopefully things settle down a little bit more, get a little more normal, we might do some other cool stuff. So why don't we dive into the garage? Let's start with Nicole.
Oh, we get to start with me. Okay. So This was actually what I drove right before I disappeared for vacation. I did the first drive for the Jeep Wrangler 4xe, which is the new plug-in hybrid from Jeep. They took us down to Austin, Texas. They had us drive around off road. They had us driving on the highway, and we got a chance to really check it out. They had it, when you go on a Jeep program, you always know that there's going to be some kind of off-road thing that's legitimately off-road. They're not just going to take you down a dirt path that like any old sedan could handle. Like they actually let you drive them off-road. And they did with this one. We went down some rocks where you had that horrible skid plate sound, like that noise that you're like
grinding.
Like if it was any other situation, be saying, oh no, what have I done? But it's a good sound on a Jeep program. You're okay with it. And it handles exactly like a Wrangler. You'd expect a Wrangler to be able to go up and down rocks and loose gravel. And we even went through some water that was fairly deep enough that you couldn't do it without the doors on the vehicle, because somebody tried to convince me to go through that. Well, like, yeah, you could totally go through that with the doors off. I'm like, no, you go through it with the doors off. I'm not going to go through that water. I don't want a wet butt for the rest of this drive program. And it handles it all. So in terms of driving, it still had the capability, and this was a Rubicon that we took off-road. It still has the same capability you'd expect from a Wrangler. What you don't expect, and it's really cool. So, the whole plug-in thing, you kind of think like, okay, great. I have a plug-in EV. I have, I think, 20-ish miles of all electric range. You can plug in, you can take advantage of that, lower your fuel costs, be more environmentally friendly. But what was really cool is like, you don't think about the fact that one of the big things when you're off-road in a Jeep, you can take off your doors, you can take off your roof, can drop the windshield, and you're about as surrounded by the outdoors as you can be, right? But you still normally hear the engine. If you save that EV mode, because you have a little select switch where you can choose how you use that battery. If you save it until you're off-road and you push that when you're in the, off-road in the middle of nowhere, suddenly you hear things you never would hear when you're off-roading. Like you can hear the grass crunching under your tires. You can hear like crickets in the grass. You can hear like grasshoppers hopping around, their little wings and stuff fluttering. It was really very, very cool and very immersive, which is, EVs are one thing, plugins are one thing, but to be able to have that outdoor Jeep Wrangler in the elements kind of experience, but to hear everything around you and nothing scared by you because you no longer have an engine making a racket as you're driving around was really, really neat. It was a whole new experience. So I liked it. In case you can't tell, I thought it was really neat. I thought that was cool.
So the plug-in hybrid is several hundred pounds heavier than the standard Wrangler Rubicon, which is, not a lightweight to begin with. Did that weight, have any problems? Or, when you were driving just pure electrically off road, obviously the electric motor's got plenty of torque, but did it, without the engine, did it seem like it had enough power and torque?
It really did. Like I was wondering that, especially as we're trying to, go up fairly steep. They have this big rock, it's like giant rock, and you had to go up it and then go down the other side. And it actually made it eat like the way the torque, when you have the EV and you instantly have the torque. So it made it very easy to modulate getting up nice and smoothly, but you don't feel, I guess you feel the heaviness a little. I mean, if you just drove a Wrangler with just a gas engine and then hopped in this one, maybe you would notice a difference, but is it enough that you suddenly think, oh gosh, this is heavier. This is unwieldy. This doesn't feel balanced. This doesn't feel capable or have the oomph to get over what you need to get over. Not at all. I mean, it really, if you didn't know, I don't think you would know. Like if no one told you, I don't think you would notice the difference in a negative way that you were driving the plug-in instead of the straight up gas engine.
Cool. One of the things that Jeep has announced is a partnership with Electrify America to start installing charging stations at the trailheads of a lot of the most popular trails, like the Rubicon Trail in California and Moab and several other locations. I think they've talked about 16 or 17 locations where they're going to install chargers. So when you get there, you can drive to the trail, plug in, top off the battery, and then drive the trail electrically. And with the Wrangler, I think it's officially rated at 21 miles. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think the Rubicon Trail is about 16 or 17 miles. So you should be able to do pretty much the whole trail on electricity alone. Did they talk about that at all?
Yeah, they did. In fact, they even had one of the officially Jeep branded charging stations that they had out at the ranch where we were driving so that you could see it and see how it plugs in. It can handle 2 vehicles at a time. And we asked, some of them are going, it depends which trailhead they're at. Some of them are going to be theoretically plugged into the grid. So they will just have, electricity coming to them. Others will be solar. If they're in some place where you just can't, there's no way to plug it in. And I asked about the solar, like how many charges do you get? Like if one guy charges his Jeep today, are you done? If that's a solar charger, are you going to get some serious charging? And they said, well, they can do 2 at a time. They figure at least 12 Wranglers a day could fully charge their vehicles at one station if they wanted to. But it was kind of neat when you like got to get a little sciencey, the exact angle of the sun, how close you are to the equator, how many hours of sun you get. It's going to be more than 12. How much more? Break out your math and you can figure that out, because it's a hard number to identify. But yeah, they have them and they're, they look cool. The little grid on top for the solar actually, moves a little bit as the sun moves. So it's a neat setup.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've ridden the Alta. Well, before Alta went out of business, they had a dirt bike, electric dirt bike, and then Zero, of course, has their dual sport bikes. And I've ridden those off road, and it is really nice. It's really nice to like sort of go off road and not have that engine noise, is whatever, and just kind of like ride around, and you feel it's like you're riding a bike without all the sweat. With all the effort.
No, it really did. It was like I was excited to drive it. I like Jeeps in the first place. I like the Wrangler, and I wanted to see how this worked, but I really didn't. It didn't click to me how cool that would be to be able to hear everything. Like I realized there was like a little creek running somewhere nearby where we were driving, because you couldn't hear it until you put it in EV mode, and suddenly like, wait, there's water nearby. Like you literally hear things and know things about where you are that you wouldn't if you were just in a gas powered vehicle. It's an entirely new experience. And I think where people, if you just have a plug-in or an EV and you're just taking that sedan to work or just taking that SUV to take the kids back and forth to school, still does all the same. So, it's got all the perks of being an EV, but you don't appreciate the quiet the same way you do as if you're someone who is, if you're going off-road and you're outdoors, you're probably enjoying the outdoors. You probably like to hear what's around you, to see what's around you, to experience it. And you can't experience it like that in a car with a gas engine. You've got to have that quiet. It's a whole new perspective. It was really, it was compelling. It was a compelling reason to go, okay, if I was going to get a Wrangler, this could be enough to swing me to the plug-in, just because if I'm going to go off-road, this really makes that off-road experience unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, this thing's not going to be inexpensive.
Oh God, no.
The Sahara you can get the 4xe on the Sahara or the Rubicon. The Sahara starts at 48,000, and the Rubicon is 51,700, and then there's a $1,500 destination charge. But you do get it is still eligible for the $7,500 federal tax credit. And right. Then, if you're in California or some other states, there's various tax credits in those states as well. So, that does bring it down quite a bit. So, I mean, from, let's see, 53, you're down to, mid 40s, for a Rubicon with the federal tax credit. So that's not crazy expensive.
Well, and they don't have, you don't have the base. Like I'm forgetting the trim levels for the Wrangler, but you don't have the base trim of the Wrangler in this. Like it starts with the Sahara. So you're getting a pretty tricked out Jeep to begin with. You're sort of starting top middle of their standard lineup. So you're getting a lot. It's not like you're getting this teeny little, base trim, nothing fancy. It is pretty well equipped. And you can even go one higher than the Rubicon, the high altitude, which I guess technically is like a variant of the Sahara. That one is 53.8. So if you just want to go for all fancy pants, rather than the capability of the Rubicon, that's the direction you can go. So you could get this for, let's call it 54, almost 54,000.
And of course, this only comes with the 4-door version, the unlimited, not the 2-door. So you can't get the plug-in hybrid on the 2-door.
And it has, so here's one of my stupid beefs. So they have, you have red tow hooks on like the Trailhawk stuff. These have blue tow hooks, which actually look really cool. Like the bright blue, and like all the logos have that bright blue accent on it, but you can only get it on the Rubicon right now. You can't get it on the other one. So if you get the Sahara, you just have boring tow hooks. You don't have the bright blue. I'm told by the end of the year that should change. But right now I'm like, but I want the fancy blue tow hooks. Those look cool.
Have they given any indication of how many of these they expect to sell?
No, you know what I did? I do not remember that question coming up, and I haven't heard what they think the buy-in is going to be, the take rate for the hybrid versus the rest of the Wrangler lineup.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see, how customers take to this. Because in June, Ford is finally going to be launching the big Bronco, and I'll actually be making my first trip come June to Austin to drive the Bronco.
Maybe I will see you there, because I too will be in Austin driving the Bronco.
First wave or second wave?
I don't know. I'd have to look. I can tell you in a minute, but that would be cool if we're in the same wave. When am I going? I'm going to be there. I don't know, whatever Tuesday, Wednesday is.
That's the second wave. Yeah.
Okay. Are you that one?
Yeah, I'm on the first wave.
Wah, wah. I won't even see you. They'll keep us probably like completely separated so we don't overlap and cross contaminate our waves.
Probably. But Ford has previously said that they plan to offer electrified powertrains on all of their new SUVs going forward. They haven't announced anything for the Bronco yet, or for the Bronco Sport. But I would expect that sometime in the not too distant future, they will add at least a hybrid, if not a plug-in hybrid version of the Bronco, which is going to make it very interesting competition between that and the Wrangler, because they're so close in size, and they have a lot of the same kind of feature set, the ability to take the doors off and everything. And one cool thing that the Bronco has that the Wrangler doesn't is that ability on the 4-door, at least, to when you take the doors off, you can actually stash them in the back. There's a place where you can stash the doors, so you don't have to leave them behind.
Which I think is kind of, isn't the other thing I'm trying to think, was it, I can't remember if this is a Bronco Sport. It has to be Bronco. The side view mirrors are mounted right to the frame. Aren't they? They're not mounted to the frame. They're mounted to the doors on the Jeep. So you take your doors off, you have no side mirrors. If you take them off on the Bronco, you still have side mirrors. Yep. I thought that was a small but important detail.
Yeah. All right. Robbie, what about you? What'd you drive?
So I was on vacation. And so because I was on vacation and because I ended up in Hawaii on vacation, there are no fleets there. So there's no one to like say, hey, I want to review a car while I'm on vacation. So I got a 2020 Kia Sorento.
Ooh.
Yeah, I had about 6,000 miles. And I will say when I travel, if I'm renting a car, I always kind of want a Kia, because you get in they're typically good cars. And they're very easy just to plug your phone in and CarPlay works, which isn't always the case still, which seems insane at this day and age where I'm pushing like 15 buttons to get CarPlay to work. And Kia's like, you want this to work? You're like, yes. Okay, here you go. We won't bother you again for the next week. So it was a 2020, they just had the refresh. But, it was a good car. You don't, and I can only speak for Kauai and the Big Island. Those are the only two islands I've been to. But I've been, I think, 7 times over the last 15 years. No one drives faster than 55 miles an hour. Maybe you'll get someone up to 60, 65. So, I just showed up. I stuck it in eco mode because gas is expensive, and I just cruised around the island. And it was a great little car. You get the base level, which is something you don't typically get when you're an automotive journalist. Typically, when they deliver a car, when you go on a car program, they give you something, at least mid-level, typically the highest trim level they have. So, it's nice to feel like what it is when someone wants to buy a car, but they don't have the cash to update to those or upgrade to those additional trim levels. And overall, yeah, it's good. There's a third row seat in there. I don't know who could sit back there. Maybe tiny children.
I've tried that. Yeah.
He's like, no.
Like Joe Simonello probably could.
Yeah, like maybe a tiny, like if you own a monkey, you can have a monkey sitting back there. Second row is fine,
like you said.
Yeah, just plop her back there. Overall, it was a good little car. It didn't have a lot. It's not a powerful car. It's a pretty, the engine is
2.5.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not flying up those hills. The Big Island has a lot of it's like, oh, here's the bypass, but it's pretty much up a hill. And you're like, okay, there's no turns, just go straight up. Yeah. All right. But yeah, for them, yeah, it was a great little car. It's good for Hawaii, which is such a weird thing to say. And this sort of leads into the idea where, I think we've been hearing and everyone has seen the stories of renting cars in Hawaii, and people are renting U-Hauls. I will say that the prices are insane. When we initially looked at prices in February, when we booked our trip, if I was thinking like, oh, maybe I'll get a Jeep, just go full tourist. And it was, I think, $500 for the week. I looked about a month ago, it was $1,200 for the week. And there was nothing under $600, $800 for the week at that point. I got super paranoid at that point because, you hear about people renting U-Hauls when they get Hawaii. I'm like, yeah, my wife's not going to be down with us renting a U-Haul. Cruising around
in a box van for a week.
Yeah, around in a box van for a week. And so when we got there, I used the Avis app. And as soon as we landed, I was like trying to select the car, and the first thing that popped up was the Sorento. I wanted the Soul. I said yes, and we got it. But then when we got to the lot, they had cars there. Plus, they had across the street, they had a big field full of Jeeps and Kias and Malibus and Mustang, convertibles. All the typical Hawaii rental cars. So. And this is the Big Island. It's this is anecdotal evidence, but I think it might be getting better, but at the same time, that shortage isn't, the chip shortage isn't going, hasn't.
Well, I've tried to rent a car a couple of weeks ago in San Antonio, and we had it all secured and ready to go. And we got there, and the wait to get to the counter, because you all had to go through the counter, you couldn't go to your car, was over 3 hours. Oof. And my husband and I just literally looked and said, how much do we need to drive? Okay, you know what? Forget it. We're going to bail on the rental. I'm going to Uber because we're mostly walking around. And this was just for a weekend. But then I had this last week, my vacation was planes, trains, and automobiles to actually get to where I was going because there was bad weather in Orlando. So I got stuck in Atlanta and would maybe have been getting in. So I just gave up and said, forget it. I'm going to rent a car. And my college age daughter and I decided to drive from Atlanta to Orlando. We literally went online before I canceled my flight, like sitting in the airport, madness in Atlanta. Like, can I get this car? Yes. Reserve the car. They take my credit card, whole deal. Like, okay, I feel like it's pretty. I walked to the counter. She's like, oh no, we don't have a car for you. I'm like, but I just pay. You took my number and I have a number and
here's the receipt.
Like, no. Yeah. I'm like, what does this whole confirmation thing mean? She's like, oh no, anybody who's rented in the last 24 to 48 hours, we're not giving them a car. And I'm like, wait, anybody who's rented in the last 24 to 48, like they're going to show up and have no car? And she's like, yeah. I was like, I don't understand. So then now I have given up my flight to get there whenever that was going to leave. And I have no car. So I'm just going from counter to counter to counter and getting more panicked, and finally got down. Hertz had cars. Like, shoot, that was the only place I went to, I think 4 or 5 different places before I got one. And granted, it was last minute, but like, even if it wasn't, if you'd rented a car 2 days before, apparently at the one, they're like, well, sorry, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya, you don't get a car.
Oh, well. And you can imagine who is that person who's just like every person who walks up, I can't be on my car. Nah.
Yeah, and her attitude was totally like, it was like, as if I said, oh, can I get a cheeseburger? Sorry, we're out of burgers. Okay, I'll get something else. It was just like, can I get my car? Sorry, no. I'm like, wait, there was no remorse. There was no sense of like, what are we supposed to do without a vehicle? Imagine you showed up and you rented a car for a week and they're just like, nah.
That was my concern. I was like, oh my God, I got Turo. I put the Turo app on my phone.
Yeah.
I had it ready. I had it locked and loaded, ready to go as we landed. Like, as soon as we land, I'm making sure we get a car before anyone else.
You did the right thing, because I thought I secured a car. I thought I was all good to go and slick. And then I get there like, lady, what do you think? No confirmation number? Go somewhere else.
What is this?
About 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, we took a family vacation to Puerto Rico, and I had reserved a car with a local car rental agency, and we got there. And at the time that I had made the reservation, I mean, usually when you do a car reservation online, they ask you for your flight number and, what time you're getting in. And, I think I had put the wrong time down for the flight. And, it was like 10 in the morning. We got in at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was, usually though, they once you reserve it, they hold it for 24 hours, or at least, for most of the day. And so we got there, took the shuttle to this car rental agency and said, no, your reservation was for 10 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon now. The car's gone. We don't have anything. It's like, what?
Are planes not late in Puerto Rico? Are planes just always on time?
Always on time. You have 5 minutes, give or take, plus or minus. That's it. Once it hits 6 minutes, forget it.
Which is what I get for, going, with a local car rental agency instead of one of the big companies. And so we ended up taking the shuttle back to, and this, it was just off airport. We took the shuttle back to the airport, went to Avis. I stood in line there for an hour and did manage to get something without a reservation. While I was standing in line, I actually did, online, on the I downloaded the app and did it in there and managed to get an Explorer. But it was a mess. But so, I mean, renting cars can be a challenge, and it is particularly now. One of the listener questions we had today was from Snap, but empirical reports indicating a huge shortage of new vehicles. Any idea regarding the time frame this will be resolved? And with Detroit not making cars, what's the plan for car rental companies to replenish their fleets? No more cheap rentals, which is, what you guys both talked about, because over the last year with people not traveling, most of the rental fleets disposed of large portions of their fleet. They sold them off because if they're not renting them, they're just sitting there collecting dust and costing the company money. So they sold them as used cars. And, in fact, in the case of Hertz, they're still in Chapter 11 right now. And I think they sold off more than half of their fleet over the last year. And now the thing is, as travel is starting to pick up, they can't get any new vehicles because of this chip shortage. And it's looking now like this might last into at least the early part of 2022. During Ford's earnings call this week, they said that during the second quarter, between April and June, they expect to only be able to build about half as many vehicles as they were planning to in that 3-month period because they can't get enough chips. I mean, there's several local lots around here that are sitting with more than 12,000 F-150s that they can't deliver to customers. They can't deliver to dealers yet because they're missing some controller that they can't get chips for. They're waiting on parts. And others, depending on what the parts are, some of them they're able to build and just set them aside. In other cases, they just can't build them at all, depending how hard it is to install them after the fact.
And 2022 is when they say this is lasting until. So we've got almost another 6 to 8 months, if it's sometime in the beginning of the year, if not more.
And I really believe that people have been talking about this for a while, that people are going to go crazy with travel. Like I've been to Hawaii. Most of the time when we go to Hawaii, it's this time frame. And there weren't as many people there. There were still a lot of restaurants that weren't open. But we get a full flight there, full flight back, and they're expecting a big rush of people. And where are they going to drive? Yeah. And I think people are going to be traveling all over the country or all over the world, and they're going to get to their destination, and they're going to be like, oh, you don't have that minivan for me and my 6 kids.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's like, because if they're at a point where even if you rented something, like if you rented it a couple days out because you decided to go away for a weekend or go away sort of unexpectedly because things are still kind of cheap, and you think you have a car and you get there and you don't, what the heck do you even do? It's like, well, I see those little bicycles we could probably rent. Like, what do you do when you've got a family? That's like nightmare territory there. I would be, if I needed to rent a car for any kind of vacation right now, I would really make sure that I rented that sucker like months out, like the second, and honestly, if you didn't rent
even if you're facing a cancellation fee, you're probably better off right now to do that.
If you're going to pay like 25, 50, whatever bucks, if you have to cancel, okay. Or you show up at the airport with your family in tow and they say, nope. And you're doing what I was doing. At least it was just like me and my one kid. And I'm like, okay, I'll get myself out of this. But imagine you've got a week's vacation and you literally show up with all of that, the luggage, the car seat, all this stuff. And it's like, no, sorry, like that. Right. I would rent early because and it is getting much more crowded. I pretty much traveled throughout the whole pandemic, and I can literally see every week I'm out a little bit more crowded, a little bit more crowded, a little bit more crowded. So yeah, people are going out, and they're clearly not enough rental cars to go around.
Yeah, it's going to be tough out there. If you're planning a vacation, maybe plan one near a friend who can let you borrow a car
or somewhere where you can get Uber or Lyft or something like that.
Yeah, go to New York or well, we all want to go outside. That's the problem. We all everyone wants to go out into the woods or into the beach or somewhere where you can sort of like get outside and away from society for a little bit and away from your family. Maybe, spread them out. Yeah. Or get about 10 feet, 12 feet. So you're not in the same house.
The largest SUV you can possibly find to put the kids in the back.
You all sit way in the back. I just need a little more space. That's all. On the plane, we're all sitting in different sections.
Exactly. Like you're in row 10. The kids are in row like 52.
Yeah, that's their problem. The people in the back. Here's $1 for each of you to watch our kids. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Really sorry. Here's some candy to ply them with. Bye.
I know. Here's some candy. I gave him some candy and some Red Bull. Good luck.
Have fun.
Yeah. No. It's going to be tough. It's tough. And motorcycle rentals are so expensive. I don't know if people who vacation or it was like motorcycle ridership in the United States keeps plummeting. But those have always been expensive. But maybe that might be the answer. If you're a motorcyclist, maybe that's your answer. Fly
I'm
somewhere.
getting this,
Or just plan a vacation that's driving distance, somewhere where you can drive from your home and just take your own car.
Yeah, just take your own car.
I'm thinking about those pictures you see of countries, not the US, where it's legal to have like you driving your little scooter thing and then your wife sitting in front of you and your kids in the basket on the back and the babies in the basket on the front. Is that what you're suggesting, Roberto?
Yeah. If you know what, if you can do it, do it. I grew up riding motorcycles. We didn't ride it. We didn't wear helmets or gear in the 80s. Of course, I think we ended up in a hospital a few times with my dad, but let's not talk about that.
Details.
Yeah. Details.
Hey,
but yeah, maybe just drive somewhere.
If a kid doesn't have occasional bumps and bruises and scrapes, they're not playing enough. They're not getting enough exposure to the world.
Exactly.
They're not getting that real life experience they need to be successful adults.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you cause those bumps and bruises, then that's parenting.
Exactly.
As long as you're taking care of the kid afterwards, that's the important thing. All right. On that note, I had since we last recorded, two very different SUVs. Actually, one's a real honest to goodness SUV. The other one, is a crossover. The first up was the Lexus GX460, which in other parts of the world is sold as the Toyota Land Cruiser Prado. It's a slightly shorter version of the Land Cruiser that we get here in North America. And this is a classic body on frame SUV, big, brawny sucker. It's smaller, shorter than the Land Cruiser, but it's still a big beast of a vehicle, and it feels like it. This does not feel like a modern vehicle. It feels like a classic, which is good and bad. I mean, if what you want is something that has Lexus style luxury inside, but still has the ability to crawl over boulders like a Jeep, the GX460 is for you. Who those people are, I have no idea, but apparently they're out there because Lexus is still selling this thing, and it's got the 4.6 liter, I think, or 5.46 V8, 4.6 liter V8, and 301 horsepower. It's got a thirst for petroleum products. Let's say.
No.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. I was getting about 12 to 14 miles per gallon with this thing. It does, it like a Jeep, it's got things like, it's got a 2-range transfer case. So it's got a 4-wheel drive low mode. You can lock the differentials and stuff. So, I mean, you really can take this thing off road. You probably would want to put on some better tires if you're going to do that, because the tires it comes with aren't really all terrain. But the chassis got the capability to handle all that kind of stuff. It's by current Lexus standards. I mean, this thing's been around for a while, and you get inside and it feels kind of classic. It doesn't have the, it's got nice materials, leather, nice leather and everything, and wood trim, but it doesn't feel very modern inside. This is one of the only Lexus vehicles that has a touchscreen infotainment, but doesn't have either the touchpad or the older style, little mousy joystick thing. So it's just a straight up touchpad. It doesn't have support for Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. This is like an ancient version of Lexus, the Lexus N-Form, which is their skinned version of Toyota's Entune, older style Entune system. It's not a great infotainment system. The vehicle itself, it feels a little soft. It doesn't feel buttoned down when you're driving on the road, so it's got a fair bit of body roll. If you hit the brakes, you can feel it diving, that sort of thing. It doesn't feel as well controlled as, say, a JL Wrangler, a current generation Wrangler. I'd have a really hard time recommending this thing to anybody. I mean, if what you want, because it's older, like why? Yeah, I mean, if you're going to buy a brand new vehicle, brand new SUV, and you want something that's got, if you want something that's got off-road capability, I'm not sure why you would necessarily want the combination of kind of old school classic luxury and that serious off-road capability. But if you do, you might want to look at something like a used Range Rover or something like that.
So that's what's going to be my question. If you wouldn't recommend this one because it's a little long in the tooth and, it doesn't have the updated infotainment and is feeling its age a little bit, what would you recommend for the person who thinks they want this, but wants it to look like 2021?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm trying to come up with an answer myself. So
yeah, I mean, the thing is, you go to a Range Rover, a new Range Rover is going to cost you a lot more than this. I mean, this one was $67,335, including the delivery charge, which is, it's not crazy expensive
right.
by modern standards. I mean, you can easily get a Wrangler more expensive than that, with careful, with injudicious use of the options list.
Yes.
But I guess, I think, like I said, if you want the off-road capability, I guess I'm just not sure who the customer is for this type of vehicle anymore.
Super villains. The super villain, they have out in the middle of nowhere. They have their lair, but they also want to be pampered while they're driving. I guess they would just got a G-Wagon. Never mind.
Yeah.
I feel like,
that's the thing, a G-Wagon, has got the same kind of thing, but it's a lot more expensive than this,
Yeah.
I feel like this is a person who has to have that big SUV for the whole family, like needs the seven, I keep wanting to say 7-passenger, like giant 7-passenger vehicle, wants that big burly luxury, but somehow lives someplace where they have a giant mountain cabin that requires off-roading to get to it. Like what, if you live in Colorado, like, are there certain areas where this vehicle really does make sense?
It could be. I'm sure there are, but
Hawaii. Everyone has to go off road in Hawaii, parts of Northern California, lots of parts of California, actually.
Yeah, I feel like there's places where this makes sense. Maybe not exactly this one, like you said, something more modern, but this kind of thing makes sense for a person who has the big family, wants the luxury, but maybe really lives out there a little bit where the roads are optional or roads are questionable much of the year if the weather's terrible. Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to come up with a customer case here.
Yeah. They would probably get something else though, because they want CarPlay.
Yeah,
probably.
That's very true. And you don't get any of those kinds of modern features. It does have a CD player in it. So there's that.
Ooh.
Oh, my daughter mocked a car the other day for having a CD player. She's like, there's a CD player in this? I'm like, yeah, why? I'm like, just move along.
I mean, for what it's worth, Lexus was also the last automaker to offer a model in North America with a cassette deck in it.
Were they really?
Yeah, the old SC 430 convertible, that kind of weird bulbous looking one. Yep. That was the last car you could buy in the U.S. market with a cassette deck in it.
Do you know what it was? I'm curious.
It was like 2011 or 12.
You could get a cassette deck in a car in 2011?
It was the only one for several years, like the last 2 or 3 years of its lifespan. Yeah. But
you couldn't buy a cassette, but you could get a car with it.
You can actually buy a cassette, but you can play your mixtapes from 1985, though. That was cool.
Well, plus, in those days, you could also get the cassette adapters for your iPod. So
that's right.
And plug in your iPod because nobody had USB or
USB ports.
USB ports were still relatively new in cars at that point.
Okay, I guess that's fair. I'm still shocked that a car had a cassette player in 2011.
So the Lexus GX may very well be the last car with a CD player in North America for a while. But sticking with the GX theme, the other vehicle I had after the Lexus went away was the 2021 Buick Encore GX, which is kind of the complete opposite. This is a small compact crossover. It's based on the same platform as the Chevy Trailblazer, so it's a little bit bigger than Buick's smallest vehicle, which is the regular Encore, which we've had for several years, and the Chevy Trax. So this is roughly the size of a Honda HR-V, or a lot of other ones in that size class. So not quite the compact, like RAV4 CRV size, one step down from that. And I actually really like this a lot. This is a new model last year. It's I like the design of this thing. It's really good. And there's two engines available in there. It's front wheel drive or all wheel drive. Two 3-cylinder turbos. A 1.2 liter is the base engine, and a 1.3 is the optional engine. And if you get all wheel drive like the one I had, the 1.3 is the only engine available with all wheel drive. If you get the front wheel drive, both engines come with a CVT, which is another reason to get the all wheel drive, because you get a 9-speed automatic with that.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but I really like 3-cylinder turbos. I like the way they sound. They have that unique growl. There's nothing else that sounds quite like it. And this 1.3 that's in the Encore and was also in the Trailblazer I drove a few months ago. It's 155 horsepower from a 1.3 liter. The base 1.2 liter is 137 horsepower, 162 foot-pounds of torque. This one's 155 and 174 foot-pounds of torque. And for a vehicle this size, that's a good amount of power. It's got good. It's very responsive, very easy to drive. And it's a Buick, so it's not. They're not trying to make it sound like a sports car, but it's got just enough of that growl to make it sound kind of fun. And it was really enjoyable to drive. I think it's got good driving dynamics, good size to it. It's a really nice urban vehicle. It's small enough that it's really easy to park, but it's still big enough that adults can fit in the back seat. A pair of adults can fit in the back seat, and you still have a decent amount of cargo space behind the rear seat. Or if you need to carry bigger stuff, you can fold down the back seat. And I think it's a really nice balance of style, driving dynamics, and performance and efficiency at the same time. It's EPA rated at 28 miles per gallon combined. That's about what I got in a week of driving it. And, this one was equipped with, this one, the Essence model. So it basically was fully loaded with everything, including one of my favorite features of recent years, which is the digital camera mirror system. So you flip the little switch on the bottom that, it used to be that's, when you were driving at night and you had somebody behind you, you'd flip that to get the dimmer version of the mirror. Now that flips you to the digital mirror system. And in so many new cars, your rear visibility is so constricted by thick C-pillars and headrests in the back seat and everything else that, with the digital mirror, you get a view of everything, and you can adjust the angle, so you can, go to a wider angle view if you want, or just something that's basically a 1-to-1 view. And I really like these, and they've gotten better. The first ones, when they first launched it a few years ago on the Chevy Bolt and the Cadillac CT6 in 2017, some people complained about the frame rate on there, and they've actually sped it up, so it looks smoother now. It's a faster frame rate on there.
I remember the first time I tried one, and it was a couple of years ago, that I think it was probably the frame rate, but things, especially if you were driving down a road that, say, you had like orange, barrels on the side because there was construction, or something that was repeating on either side, going past you in the rearview mirror. It was this weird sort of disconcerting thing. I'm like, I don't like this, but it was like, it's like, oh my God, it's like a flicker, like you're having like an epileptic thing. Like I can't look at that. But they are much better now. I've taken a turn the other direction, and I love them. When I have those in a car, I absolutely love them. Make it so much easier to see, and you don't have to worry about what's shoved in the back of your car. I like them. I think they're a great idea.
Do you still look into because I've caught myself do this. Do you still look into the rearview mirror to talk to someone in the back seat, even though you have the rear?
Oh my God, I do it all the time.
You do that,
I look up and I'm like, nope, Yes.
Yeah.
It's a ghost
do
car.
that. Yeah, you want to. You're like, I can't. How do I talk to the human? I guess I have to just look forward and talk to them now. This is weird.
Which is what you should be doing anyway.
Well,
But
you glance in the rearview mirror all the time to see like what's happening in the back seat. To see what's happening. You're fine.
But one thing
it needs to have a split screen thing so you can see it, and then it needs to be like one of those little other thing like talk to rear passengers.
So you have a separate camera that's just focused on the back seat.
Yeah, just so you can just see the kids and you can chat with them. Yeah, they need to see you though, because when you look in the rearview mirror, they can look at you. It can't just be a camera that the driver can see. It has to be something the kids.
You need cameras everywhere. You need a camera at each seating position.
Everywhere. Yeah, in every single seat to monitor everything.
And everybody needs their own display so they can look at whoever they want.
Jeep is getting there. They're putting that camera, what's the extra screen in front of the front passenger on the Grand Wagoneer.
Grand Cherokee and the Wagoneer. Yeah. Or maybe it's just the Wagoneer. Yeah.
I think it's just the Grand Wagoneer. Or the Wagoneer. Yeah. Grand Wagoneer, the fanciest of Jeeps, wherever we are with that right now.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I did notice, it was raining for a couple of days when I had it, and I was driving on a dirt road, and when you drive on a dirt road in the rain, you get all the splash on the back, and of course, on these, small crossovers and hatchbacks and stuff, you have a wiper on the rear window on the tailgate, but the swept area of that wiper, the wiper is usually about 10 inches long, on these things, and you have this tiny little swept area. So even with the wiper going, you can't really see very much behind you because of the mud and dust and stuff. And so there's actually a separate washer jet just for the camera.
So that's smart.
Yeah,
that is smart.
And so when you hit the rear washer, it's got the separate washer jet that cleans the camera, so you always have a completely clear view behind you, which is great. I thought that was a really nice addition. I hadn't noticed that on any previous vehicles I've driven, but I think they actually do have that on some of the other GM vehicles now. But I just hadn't had the opportunity to realize it, because you can tell when it washes, because you'll see the spray on the mirror, as the fluid goes across there, and then it's clear.
What's happening?
But then you get it again. You get back to that unobstructed view, which was great. And of course, it has this one had the adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, and blind spot monitoring, heads up display, navigation, wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support, which is great to have. And all in, including delivery, $35,170, which is not bad at all, for something, that's in a more premium segment like this. I mean, if you compare this to something like an Audi Q3 or a Lexus NX, or UX, I guess Lexus UX would be the closer size wise. It's very, very competitively priced. And I think it's a great option for somebody that's looking for a more premium, smaller crossover. If you're doing a lot of urban driving. So
a lot of Buick Encores in the rental fleets in Hawaii. I'll tell you that as well.
The original Encore or the GX?
No, just the original.
Oh, okay.
Just the original, not the GX. No, you don't get fancy stuff. And
Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk, because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings.
Rather than some news this week, we've got a bunch of listener emails to respond to. We already talked about the one about the rental car fleets, but let's start with Chuck Goolsby. And this is Chuck is a Patreon supporter, and he sent this to us through Patreon. He said, "My little sister recently asked me where to find a used BMW station wagon. Yes, some people still like wagons. Hey, I am one of them. I love wagons. They're great. She lives in Seattle with her husband and one teenager and a Bernese mountain dog. I imagine she asked me since I'm the car guy and also own 5 BMWs. Yes, it's a problem." And he lists, from 79 E21 320 up through his wife's 2015 535i. My first instinct, of course, is to warn her off of BMWs, despite my good luck with all of mine. She has owned 2 other wagons, a VW Jetta and a Subaru Outback, the latter from which you're going to need 2 new head gaskets era. And then she drives a Honda CR-V now, which is going to my teenage nephew. I think she wants a BMW for the interior luxury qualities and the wagon for the practicalities that make wagons so wonderful. Ideally used, well cared for, 3 to 6 years old. My only thought was the BMW CCA classifieds, but beyond that, and Auto Trader, eBay Motors, etc., I have no idea where to find such a unicorn or even how much it would cost her. What wagons are even sold in the 2014 to 2018 timeframe, even beyond BMW, Volvo, Mercedes. The only wagons I see around here in Central Oregon are ubiquitous Subaru Outbacks, which are so numerous as to be essentially invisible. I think I see a BMW wagon once or twice a year, so rarely that I would likely whip out my phone and post it to visit on Facebook. And any advice you could pass along would be nice. So, I actually already responded to Chuck by email when we got this question, but you actually can get a BMW 3 Series wagon in that exact time frame. They sold the previous generation, was it F30 3 Series, was available in the U.S. market as a wagon, as a touring, right up through the 2017 model year. The current generation, they don't offer the wagon anymore, but you could get it on those models. So that's one option, obviously, if you want BMW. There's also Volvo, Audi. I don't think Mercedes has sold a C-Class wagon here for a while.
Yeah.
There's also the Golf All-Track, the VW Golf All-Track. If you,
I like that
I think it's still available. And then but not a whole lot else. I think I personally really like the Volvo V60. That's a really good size. I mean, if you don't need the V90 is great, but it's really big. The V60 is a really nice size, and you can also get that as the cross country model if you want, slightly higher ride height, just enough ride height to make it look like an SUV, but without actually being useful. But
yeah, the V60 was my, if he wasn't going to go for the 3 Series wagon, that V60 was my choice. It looks nice. It looks, it's the previous design, but my wife saw one in a parking lot once and she hates everything. And she's like, "Oh, what's that?"
Yeah.
And it was the blue. Of course, the blue is always eye catching. But those V60s, they're really nice, and you get the luxury, you get the idea. You're not going to look like every other Outback on the road. I think it hits a lot of the points that his sister's looking for.
Nicole, you got any thoughts?
I don't know. I'm kind of, when you said All-Track, I'm kind of on that, the Golf All-Track. I like that.
Yeah,
that would be my thought. Yeah.
And modern VWs, if you get a relatively more recent one, they've got, if you were to find like a 2018 or 2019, they still had a 6-year warranty, 6-year bumper to bumper warranty on there, which means that, even if you or if you get unlucky and get one of the VWs, like our first Passat wagon that seems to be in the shop every time you turn around, at least it's not going to cost you a fortune.
I've had 2 Volkswagens, and both of them, I drove them right into the ground. Like I drove them for 10 years, 11 years, and they ran perfectly until the day they decided they didn't. It was like right when I was getting ready to get rid. I was like, this is holding up great. It's been fantastic. It's like, I have a new car coming in a week. It's like, I'm out, forget it. Everything's going to start falling off. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I timed that well.
It's like in the movie where they tell the person, it's okay. It's okay, Tony Stark. It's okay. You can leave us now. And the car's like, oh, good.
Exactly. It's like, okay, little car, little Jetta, you can leave. And it's like, fine. And it's like a cartoon. A wheel falls off, a door falls off, the antenna breaks in half. Like everything just as I drove into the dealership to get a new one.
The smoke out of the engine bay.
The muffler was falling off like minutes before I got there. So I drive from my house and it's like nice little engine purr. I get there, it's like you can hear me coming 4 blocks away. I'm like, oh my God.
We had a 2000 Passat wagon with that 1.8 liter turbo that was great to drive, and we had that car for 9 years, and my wife loved it. It was fantastic to drive. I mean, it was basically it was a B4 Audi A4 or B4 or B5 maybe it was a B5. It was essentially exactly the same as the Audi A4 of that era, but just cheaper. And it was fantastic, except for all the time it spent in the shop. But we still kept it for 9 years, and still it was so great to drive that we turned around and replaced it with another VW wagon. We got a 2010 Jetta TDI wagon, which we kept for 7 years until we sold it back to Volkswagen for a tidy sum in the wake of their little issue with emissions testing.
That little whole emissions thing some people may have heard of, maybe.
Yeah, but but what you were saying, Nicole, about it being great right up until the time it wasn't. We had the panoramic moonroof in there, and so there was a power shade that would go back and forth. That was kind of a mesh shade that was translucent, and maybe about a month or so after they announced the buyback program for the diesels, my wife pulled into the garage. She was about to pull out, and she went to put the shade back, and it went back about halfway on one side and stopped, and the other side kept going.
Oh God.
And so it got twisted around, and the mesh got torn, and so she came in and said, "Can we fix this?" And I looked at it, and I went online, did a little research, and it turns out that the parts for it to fix that, it was apparently not an uncommon problem on those Jettas. It was about $500 for the parts, about $1,500 if you took it to the dealer, because there was so much labor involved, because they have to take out the entire headliner and tear all kinds of things apart. Yeah. And so since we had already decided we were going to do the buyback, I went in with a box cutter, just cut the whole thing out, and went to AutoZone and got some window tint film and put it on the inside of get some extra shade inside.
And done for $5.
Yeah. And then left it like that until we turned it in. One of those VW things.
Mine really did, and I learned how to drive a manual transmission on that Jetta. Like I saved money. I don't know, it was like $500 or $600 less to get a manual. I didn't know how to drive one, so I literally learned on it, and it still made it. I had that for like 10 or 11 years. So I mean, like I said, right until I drove into the dealership to exchange to trade it in. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I know it used to be with VWs. It was very hit and miss. You could get a car that would run for 250,000 miles with no problem, except for oil changes and tires, or you could get one that would be in the shop every other week. And, it was a crapshoot. But so we got lucky with one, not so lucky with the other.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Speedmaster. What does an electrified future hold for off-road vehicles, off-road four-wheel drive vehicles, which we kind of talked about already with the Wrangler? Will sophisticated diffs and traction control become irrelevant if each wheel is separately powered? Other thoughts? I'd say yes. The answer to your question is probably yes. Because
everything is controlled by the computer, and you're talking about microseconds, of when you're sending torque or power to each wheel. it's it's the amount of control the vehicle is going to have over each wheel is going to be staggering compared to what you're used to with a typical 4x4. And I think there's going to be the potential, and it might be aftermarket, it might be Jeep, where you have, they're going to give you this like extra level of control of how much power you're sending to every individual wheel. And, initially everyone's going to be like, I don't want an electric car outside. I need a big engine and giant wheels and the flip over and whatnot. But I think people are going to start coming around when they start using these things. And once, as the technology matures, the first one's probably going to be good, but 2 generations later, it's going to be great.
Yeah. And, this year, we're going to have the first couple of electric truck, off-road capable trucks coming to market with Rivian, probably sometime late summer. And, Rivian their setup is using 4 motors, 2 on each axle. So there's a separate motor driving each wheel. So, and you're not even going to have differentials. You're just going to have individual control to each wheel. And then later in the year, the Hummer EV, that's a 3-motor setup, two motors on the rear axle, 1 on the front. So there'll be a differential on the front of that one, but on the rear, they'll probably do some sort of torque vectoring just by individual motor control. And if and when Lordstown ever manages to build get their truck into production, that one actually uses 4 hub motors. So the motors are actually right in the wheels. That one I think is going to be a little more problematic. I see a lot of potential problems with that.
It's also Lordstown, so there's a lot of problematic going on right there.
It's more than just that one issue.
It's more than that one thing. It's a whole laundry list of yeah.
All right. Next, from Tim Martin. Any recommendations for a used plug-in hybrid or EV in the $20,000 to $30,000 range that drives and handles well? Typically drive about 15,000 miles, presumably a year, and less than 10-mile commute each way. Looked at the Clarity and an old Model S. Thanks. Any thoughts?
I love the e-Golf. I absolutely love the e-Golf. It's a GT with an electric powertrain. It's a ham-fisted EV. They just sort of shoved a battery and an electric motor into an ICE platform. But I really, really love driving that car. The 500e, also the Fiat 500e you have over here, that's the best Fiat 500. I leased the Fiat.
Yes.
I leased the Fiat 500, just the regular one, and you could feel it falling apart, and it was kind of loosey goosey. And but it worked for what we needed at the time. And then I got the 500e, and I'm like, why did they even make this other car?
Exactly. Yeah, the 500e was always my favorite version. Yeah. The Abarth made lots of noise, but didn't really feel that fast. The 500e actually felt a lot quicker because of that instantaneous torque.
Oh, yeah.
No, I like the 500e. That's it. Like you said, Roberto, that's my favorite Fiat. Like, why do we have others? Like, why just do this one? Go all in with the 500e. And I actually like the Ioniq a lot too. From that little list that we kind of cobbled together before the show. Those would be my two picks.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of other options. One of the nice things, especially if you're buying used, not so much if you buy them new, but one of the things about especially battery electric vehicles for if you're a used car buyer is the resale value is terrible. There's so much depreciation on them, especially on these first and second generation EVs like the 500e, the e-Golf. You can get some screaming deals on these things. It's not at all hard to find a 500e for well under 10 grand. And I think e-Golfs are similarly priced. But there's other options too. The Chevy Bolt is a great EV and it drives quite well. The second generation Volt in particular, which is slightly roomier than the first generation. You can find both of those for under 20 grand, for comparatively low mileage. If you want a plug-in hybrid, the Ford Fusion Energy, the plug-in hybrid version is also good. And if you want something more premium that still falls within this $20,000 to $30,000 price range, I took a quick look. You can find BMW 330Es in that price range, which it seems surprisingly low, but that's what's available out there. So you can get a plug-in hybrid 3 Series for, under $30,000. So there's a bunch of options out there.
Yeah. If you're driving, if most of your commute is in town, if you're in an urban area, the i3 is just a fun if you're a fun wacky individual, the i3 is a fun wacky car. If you're not that individual, then I would not say it.
Yeah. It does drive
wacky.
well.
Okay.
Yeah.
It does drive well, but there are two
It's
camps
unique
for the
looking.
IAV. Yes, it is the concept car that everyone's always, you see a concept car. Why don't they make those? And BMW's like, okay, we will. And then everyone
that's why we don't make those.
Well, and the i3 is the absolute cheapest car you can buy in the world with a full carbon fiber chassis. So think of it that way. You're buying the same kind of chassis technology that you get in a $400,000 McLaren.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like having that McLaren. You can hardly tell the difference. You can hardly tell the difference between the two.
They're both rear wheel drive. They have carbon fiber chassis. They have, two usable seats and two.
They're essentially the same car. So
they're essentially the same car.
Yeah, exactly.
They're both wacky looking. It's everything.
What more could you ask for?
The i3 is the EV McLaren. Is what we're.
Seems perfectly plausible to me.
Yeah, that works.
All right. Next up, Shane. What is the actual difference between the Mercedes-Benz A-Class and the CLA class? I can't believe they're both still on sale. I don't think they've ever actually sold the A-Class in North America, have they? Did they? I can't remember.
The A-Class?
Yeah. Did they sell it here?
Yeah, I just drove a.
But the A-Class and the CLA are basically the same thing, except that the CLA is a coupe-ish like sedan and the A-Class is a hatchback. So, it's a golf sized, compact hatchback, and the CLA has a trunk. But under the skin, they're the same thing. So I'm sorry. Is he asking about the hatchback, the wagon? We don't get the wagon here. Yeah.
Boo, but we do get the sedan.
Yeah. So
the sedan's dope.
It is, but you have, as with most small sedans, you have a tiny trunk opening, and no space to actually put anything into the trunk. Whereas with the hatchback, you get, the same basic vehicle, but you also, when you want to put some big stuff in the back, you can fold down the back seat and you have a big opening to put it in there with. So, all right, next from And That, Project Classic Cars. Keep them stock or modernize them?
That's hard. I think it depends on the car.
I think it depends on the individual. I think do whatever you want with your car. Unless you have one of 4 cars built of whatever you own, just do whatever you want with your car. If you want to make an EV conversion, go for it. If you want to put a CD player in your Impala, go for it. If
or
you want
a cassette player, even.
Yeah,
if you want to put a cassette player, if you want to put if you want to put CarPlay and a Model T, do whatever you want. That is my
I vote for
process.
8-track.
I want to see that, Roberto. I want to see the Model T that somehow has a little screen and Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. It's the most teched out Model T ever. It puts modern cars to shame with its level of tech once you open the door.
Just plop, 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 plop. That sound that old cars make.
I'm not sure a Model T actually has enough electrical power from its electrical system.
You have to put another battery in.
You have to add that. That's part of the beauty of your project car. You would make that happen.
You put a little generator in the back, no, shh. This is so I can listen to my tunes.
My iTunes.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you guys. It's you bought the car. It is yours to do with whatever you want. Whatever makes you feel good, go for it. If you want to have a Concours edition, all original matching numbers, with, repainted from a leftover batch of the original paint that was used on that car 50 years ago, go for it. If you want to build a resto mod, where you put a modern engine into a 1960s classic, go for it. If you want to take a classic and make it electric, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that.
It has to make you happy, because no matter what you do, no matter what choice you make, somebody's going to think you made the wrong one.
Absolutely.
So don't listen to anybody. If you're happy, I don't care if you don't like my car. My car is my money. I don't care. You just have to do what makes you happy and forget what anybody else says, because there's someone who's going to love it and there's someone who's going to think you made the most horrific mistake ever. So ignore them and do what you want.
Yeah, because they're wrong.
They're wrong.
Yes.
It's your car.
It's your car.
Your money, your car. You're driving it. It's all yours.
Just don't expect to go on like the boards and with your Model T with with CarPlay and go on the Model T boards and not get yelled at for that.
I won't yell at them.
What you
I'll think
did.
it's brilliant. I'll be like, I want to drive this Model T.
We'll
Bring
be right
it here.
there cheering you on.
Like, woohoo!
Invite us to the boards as your as your defenders.
All right. Next up from Brianna Wu, friend of the show. What do you think of the new Taycan Cross Turismo? This is the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo. Is it an upgrade over the standard model? I think I have a feeling I know what you two are going to say. What do you think?
I love the Taycan, and I haven't driven the Cross Turismo. But I am very excited about the opportunity to drive it. And as a fan of wagons and a fan of, from a town where I had to go off road a bunch of times, I'm like, yeah, I'm very excited about it, but I haven't driven, so I can't say yay or nay.
Yeah,
but.
I haven't driven the Taycan at all. Like I don't even, so I mean, like looks cool. The, Gran Turismo looks cooler, or Cross Turismo looks cooler. I would like to drive that too. But I have no firsthand experience. So it's like, looks wise, I like it. Concept wise, I like it.
I agree too. I unfortunately, I'm still waiting for Calvin at Porsche to hook me up with a Taycan. Hopefully it'll be the Cross Turismo instead. I did get a chance to ride in the Taycan a couple of years ago at in the prototype at the New York Formula E race in 2019. They had one there that they were doing some hot laps in between races with it. So I got to ride along with Neil Yanni, former Le Mans winner. He was
and
driving
how was that?
That was
boring.
That was just totally boring. Yeah, it was just totally uneventful. You get in a car with a guy who's won the 24 hours of Le Mans overall. It's no big deal. No, I mean it was amazing. It was really impressive how well that car felt. And that was still a prototype at that point. But I'm anxiously waiting for my opportunity to drive a Taycan, and I'd love to have the Cross Turismo because the thing with I think the Taycan looks great, but with that sloping roof line, the back seat is going to be a little tighter. Whereas with the Cross Turismo, you've got the extended roof line, you've got that extra space in the back, for some utility, but it's still the same car underneath. Yeah. Although lifted, I think about an inch or so. So you have, all the benefits of driving the Taycan, and, that extra utility as well.
I will tell you that I've driven the Turbo S and the Turbo. I haven't driven the sort of base model yet. It is amazing what the engineers at Porsche did to make that car drive the way it does with that giant battery underneath. I was just like, and people always ask me like, oh, what's your favorite car? What's your favorite car? And it's hard to say, well, this is my favorite car because every week you're in a different car and it's sort of, and without, the week after I drove that and then a bunch of cars for World Car of the Year, I probably drove about 30 cars. Someone asked me, and like without thinking about Taycan, that's It's just if you could have any car, I'm a Taycan.
And one thing about the Taycan, when it was first launched, there was a lot of disappointment and criticism because of its EPA range rating, which was decidedly mediocre. I think the longest range one was rated at like 204 miles. I think the Turbo S was like 198 miles. Which, when you compare that to a Tesla Model S, it seems very, very mediocre. Turns out, though, that apparently Porsche was sandbagging when they did the testing, and real world range is actually far better. I think one of the most recent ones I saw. Typically, most of the real world testing I've seen with the Taycan, it's anywhere from 280 to 290 miles of range, so now you're in that 300, close to 300 mile range. That's enough for just about anybody. And the Taycan supports 350 kilowatt charging, so you can charge it really fast at Electrify America stations. And by comparison, the Model S typically falls anywhere from 15 to 25% short of its range of its EPA ratings. So they're actually pretty close in terms of real world capability. take for that what you will.
Yeah, when they announced the EPA numbers, I was very confused because they didn't match my experience behind the wheel of the car. And this is driving up and down Andros Crest Highway and driving like an automotive journalist and using the launch control multiple times because that's my job. And they were like, oh, it's like 200-ish miles. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. What is? And then it came out later that they were like, yeah, we went with the lower number. And then there's this whole like the whole way the EPA does EV range is probably in need of an update.
Yeah, there's some serious inconsistency there.
Yeah, it seems very, very off from what real world is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all we've got for this week. Anything you guys want to share before we call it a day?
No, I think that's it. Come on, Roberto, come up with something really good to share.
Something really good to share. I picked up the MDX last night.
Oh,
that's really cool. Nice. I know you've talked about it, and I know you've talked about the infotainment system before. And I like y'all. I am a fan of that touchpad, and mostly because I use a Wacom tablet instead of like a mouse. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of one
so
to one.
Used to that absolute.
Yeah,
it already is intuitive for you.
I remember when the Acura, the folks came to my house and picked me up and drove me around like my neighborhood in the city in San Francisco to sort of explain it. And they're like, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. And they're like, well, I'm like, no, I use a tablet. So I think if you have the car for a little bit more than a week, you get used to it. But yeah, I'm like done.
I don't know what car I have. I won't know till it shows up in my driveway tomorrow.
Wait, what?
I have this little supercharged pickup truck.
The mystery of here, Dan will remember this. Dan, who's, he experienced this. It's like, and this week I have, hey, open the front door. Oh, that's what's here. So
yeah, they have a slightly different process up in New England.
We
Robbie.
do. So yeah, we have a little bit of a different process. So I have no idea what will arrive tomorrow sometime between 9 and 12.
Wow, that's amazing. Like I have everything like I email someone, they email me back, and then we figure out the timing for everything to show up, and then it shows up, and then
that's
every week
too.
Yeah, and it's just like, let's make a deal. What's behind door number one?
Spin that wheel, and you land on. This is what you get.
Yeah, I have a little 3-ton supercharged pickup truck out in the driveway right now.
Wow,
we'll talk about that next week.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.